Hey friends, welcome back. So today I'm going to do a review on the IQON ACT skates. In today's review, I'm going to talk about all the things that I like, the things that I don't like about the various components of the skate, give you my final thoughts, and then also follow it up with who I think this skate is best for. So let's go through an overview of the skate. So I bought and skated these for both 165 and aggressive, and I've been riding them between the two setups for about 6 months now. So if you're unfamiliar, the IQON ACT is a newer skate, came out beginning of 2025 from Power Slide, and what they claim is that you can mount this boot using adapters to basically set it up for like 165, Trinity, Wizard skating, or aggressive. So I'll talk about that in my review on what I experienced. It also has a 6-way adjustable cuff that they call the revolve system. Inside the skate, it comes with a insole with an attached shock absorber that fits bottom of the shell underneath the liner, and it comes with a MyFit prime liner, which I've got right here. And then you can buy it in various assemblies. So you can buy it either set up with like an aggressive setup that comes with IQON AG60 frames. You can buy it in the 165 setup, which is the white color that comes with 165 frames, which I bought that setup, but I didn't use the frames. You can also buy it boot only, or one thing that's new too is they just released a model that has the Trinity setup, and that was new after I bought these. It does come with the newer Kaiser buckle, and my understanding is this is improved from the Kaiser buckles that was released last year that had a history of breaking. And for your reference, I bought the 42-43, the 9.5 to 10 US, 271 to 278 Mondo, and that has a internal shell length of 287 millimeters, and for reference, my foot is a 275 Mondo. So I want to talk about what I like about the stock MyFit prime liners. So overall these liners are really, really comfortable. Comfortable liner, comfortable insole. They generally fit my foot really well for being a 275 Mondo. My widest part, kind of at the ball of my toes, is about 100 millimeters wide. I didn't notice that my foot moved around in the liner at all, and it came with laces that basically start at the forefoot, go all the way up, and you can tighten it, and it feels really, really good.
The last 30 years have been a blur, man.
so let's talk about a few things that I didn't like. So prime liners, one of the first things that I would say with these is like, I don't know what it is about them, but they always tend to give me hot spots like first session. And, I found out that I got like a couple hot spots after I like did my first video on that. So I ended up heat molding them. That problem went away. I necessarily don't like round laces in liners or skates because I feel like you can't get them to tighten and hold the way that they do, and they tend to slip out. So when I was skating these, it's one of those where you have to like double knot it or stop mid-session and kind of tighten it up as the liner warms up and gets it adjusted, and it's a little cumbersome. Not my favorite. One thing too that's interesting is, so with these MyFit Primes that come in the IQON ACT skates, they actually have different liner breaks than some of their aftermarket prime liners. I don't know why they do that. It's really confusing, like if you're a consumer, because you can only buy this liner with the skate, and they don't sell it aftermarket. So just really weird that they would make their skate like that. I did find that the toe box is a lot more narrower and kind of points. And what I found is like, I have a toe issue, and by having it kind of point in like the middle of the foot, it like pulls on my toe and makes it kind of uncomfortable and awkward. And this is also something that doesn't match the aftermarket prime liners. The aftermarket prime liners are a lot more rounded, kind of like the Intuition prime liners. I don't know what the theory behind the design change was, because when you look at the skate, it's got a wide toe box, and this is definitely not matching that shape. After breaking these in, I could tell that the liner was way too thin for the size of the shell. So basically, like with my foot inside the liner, there was room between the liner and the shell, so I could feel the liner kind of moving and rolling around in it. And it just makes for like a little uncomfortable of a big wheel ride, just because you end up with power loss, because you can kind of feel that liner like rolling over and buckling inside the shell. But then also for aggressive, where the liner sits lower than the laces, it's a little stiffer of a boot, so it's not pulling that plastic to like hug the liner the way that it needs to. So taking landings, it was like shoving my toes in the end of the skate, and that's just a really, really uncomfortable feeling. So I tried it with the toe caps that come with it, and because the toe caps add volume to the bottom, you could flip them upside down too and put it on the top. I'll talk about this more like when I talk about the shell, but it like made the toe box just really uncomfortable height wise, just because I'm at like the upper end of the shell break for my foot length, but was still within the recommended size. So I think these would be good if you're at the bottom of the shell size to fill the space, but if you're at the upper end of the shell size, I think you need to do something else to like fit it out. I'll talk about that more. And so one thing is, I had to try, I've got pretty much every single liner that's made, and I had to try through them all, and the one that fit the shell the best is the MyFit Crown 2 liner, which I've got in the skate here, just kind of with that camouflage knit, just the way it fits and where it's padded. I've been riding that for about 6 months in the skate now, and have not had really any issues with it packing in to the point that it's uncomfortable. So if you're looking for a good liner for the skate, that's what I would recommend. So I want to talk about the 165 mount and what I liked about it. So this is the only mount that I've tried. I didn't try like the Trinity mount because I don't have any Trinity frames. So that was part of the reason I bought the whites, is because it came with the 165, and you know, I rode the endless frames on there. I've already done a review of the endless frames. I need to do another one with the updated version where they made some changes. But overall, you know, I thought taking off and installing the receiver was really easy. You know, it basically mounts with 2 screws. And one thing that's kind of odd with it too is, so you know, what IQON claims is that by having this mount, it makes for like a lower ride height. And you know, but what that means is you have to add a bracket to like the bottom of the skate, and then you're basically like buffing out how thick this is, so you need a really long frame bolt. And so the one that comes with it here is like the Kaiser 20, and it's probably this long, so it's a good length bolt. But yeah, if you lose that, it's gonna be hard to replace. But anyway, you know, when I rode these, you know, a lot for big wheel, I found that, you know, they didn't loosen up. There was no movement at all. And, you know, I feel like the saved ride height was nice in theory, but it's not something that I really noticed over my FR1s, which I continued to skate kind of off and on in between, you know, setups on my IQONs. So let's talk about the things that I don't like about the receiver. You know, honestly, it's not that much. It's a couple nitpicks, but you know, because this piece bolts on, you've got really short screws. So if you happen to have screws that loosen up or fall out, like if you're constantly taking them on and off, you know, that's probably a reason why they would come loose and fall off. You know, so it's going to be harder to replace because it's not really like a standard skate part. And because you have to like install this mount, it just takes more time, so it takes away from the ease of like being able to set up and take apart. One thing I noticed too is like where the mounts are for the frame bolt, they sit on top of the shell and kind of penetrate through, and there's notches within the bottom of the shell, and it allows those receivers to kind of move up and down to really customize the fit. But I noticed that, you know, trying to put on my frames, you know, specifically the endless frames, because I use it's hard to see here, but I use the self-centering washers that you can buy from Endless that go in there, but you can't really see like where the frame bolt is. So I found that they just kind of slide back and forth even if you're trying to put it in, and it just adds to time it takes to set these up. Not the end of the world, but I just wanted to be transparent about it. You know, one other thing that I think is just a little odd, and it may be kind of hard to see here, but you can see at the front, the receiver like drops off, but the Endless frames are very flat and wide, so they don't necessarily fit up, you know, that matches the receiver. And I can't imagine there's a lot of frames on the market who's going to match that like perfectly. So, you know, there's going to be a little bit of an a little bit of an aesthetic issue, but it's not the end of the world. Let's move on to talking about the aggressive setup. So these are the sole plates. You can either buy them with the skate, depending on the model you buy, or aftermarket. I bought them aftermarket for $50, so not too bad. I like that these sole plates fit perfectly around the boot, so there's no gaps, no awkwardness like you had with a couple of the earlier IQON aggressive skates where the sole plates didn't fully match the shape of the shell. So, I thought that was really good, and supposedly these sole plates are good for those past AG models, but you just have to do like a little bit of retrofitting on the inside of the sole plates. I haven't tried that yet, but that's kind of on my list of like, I want to try it on my AG15s, but I don't want to tweak the sole plate and then you end up with like weird gaps if I were to put them back on my ACTs. So, but yeah, basically, the sole plate is super, super light and stiff, and it's got this textured top, so that saves material, helps reduces weight. But yeah, the way this is designed, it is super, super stiff. So with it being stiff and hard plastic, it means that it slides extremely well. And I skated it on coping, ledges, rails, and it slid really well for like all my sole, topside, H-block tricks. I can't think of a time where I was struggling to skate these on any obstacle. I like the backslide groove. It's got this nice notch in here. I did find for the first couple sessions, I had to break in kind of the edges here just for when I'm doing some of my Farv and Unity tricks, just to get it to kind of line up with how my foot falls. But yeah, they broke in, slid really well, and I like that it holds you into place. And doing H-block tricks in these, because you're locked in and so secure, just feels amazing. So the sole plate too, one thing to mention is that it comes with 8 mounts, but on my skates there were only 4 mounts that were pre-installed on the skate, and then there's locations where you can drill out the plastic and add 4 more in. I was really lazy with it. I said, well, I'm gonna try 4. If 4 makes it solid enough, then I'm not even gonna bother messing with adding the additional 4, and I had no complaints. I thought, the 4 plus, the frame holding it into place with how stiff it is, it felt really good, didn't have any complaints, so, I just kept with the 4. One thing I noticed about the sole plates too is it's hard to tell, but I mean, I've got, a good 20 sessions on these sole plates over the last couple months, and keep in mind that I'm going between skate projects right now, and these have like minimal wear. So, and I've skated really, really hard on a bunch of different things at the skate parks. I've gone out and hit some street ledges, and yeah, they last a long time, so no complaints there. Let's go ahead and hit on a couple of the things that I maybe didn't like, and these are honestly like a couple nitpicks, but because the sole plate is textured and because it doesn't wear down very fast, I found that wax kind of sticks to it, but it didn't really slow me down or anything like that. It just makes it a little harder if you're one of those people that likes to clean off old wax, because you're going to have a little more of a challenge just kind of doing that. Second thing, I wish, if the intent is to put 8 mounts to secure the sole plate, at least have the boot be pre-drilled, because there's people out there who aren't as handy, and it kind of forces them into half setup versus the way it's intended to be ridden. So I would just say, pop the holes. You can put in the mount separately, but at least punch the holes. If the intent is to have 8 mounting points. So this piece is going to be relatively short, but this is really talking about the shock absorber with the foam insole. And so this shock absorber is basically the same that comes on the MyFit Prime liners. It just doesn't have the Velcro. And if you've ridden these in the past, I don't know why they make them so inconsistently, but I've had some that are like super, super soft, some that are, more on the firmer side. And this one is actually more on the firmer side because like when it's super, super soft, you like squish down into it as you're skating and it just gives like a really sloppy feeling. I don't like when they're that soft. Like I would say Dead is probably a little too soft, but they're one of the only two that make the really thin shock absorbers if you have like a raised heel boot. I did find that these absorbed shock very, very well. It does come with this foam insole that sits on top of it, and it does pack in a little bit, so you can see like here's the bottom, and inside the skate they have this like adhered foam that sits over the hardware, and then this sits on top of it, so you can see it's left like an indentation just from compressing, and then you can also see that kind of around the liner itself. My biggest complaint with this is, and I'll talk about it more when I talk about the shell, is basically this chews up a lot of the height inside the toe box. So if you've got bigger toes or you're at the top end of the shell size, this makes it feel smaller in length because you don't have that clearance for your toes, essentially. Let's go ahead and talk about the shell and what I liked about it. So I found the shell was really roomy width-wise for comfort. So as I mentioned, my foot is about 100 millimeters wide at the ball of my foot towards kind of like the middle section of my foot, and I didn't have any narrow pinching points. I also, with the new Kaiser buckle, no issues with those breaking. And, I've done a lot of different stuff with them. So, that's how I broke them before, was just catching it on a true Mizuno and then it snaps off. No issues there. And you can see that I've, definitely caught it and scraped it. And so they're holding up well. Honestly, I like the revolve system and how that can give you customizable options. I found that I didn't really use it. The only thing I did is like I left it in the stock down position, the 6 o'clock position for big wheel. And that's because when it was raised higher, for whatever reason, it allowed the liner inside the skate to like buckle and move more, which made it feel less responsive to me. So I preferred it down because then I could, buckle it the way I need to buckle it. And then it gave me the appropriate amount of flex that I needed for skating. The only thing that I did was for aggressive, I basically moved it back one notch to the 7 o'clock position just to get like a little bit of gap between the cuff and the shell to help with a little bit of flex. Speaking of the revolve system, that's one thing I really liked about these skates is like everybody hates loose and falling out cuff bolts. I do not have to tighten these. They stay locked in and do not have any problems. So design there, really, really good. I heard a lot of complaints about the stiffness on these skates. And I was like, great, I'll buy them for big wheel because, I like a stiffer boot for big wheel. I don't like a super flexy boot for big wheel because to me it feels really sloppy and a loss of responsiveness. Skating these, I was like, man, this is a great amount of flex for big wheel, and I feel like this is the amount of flex that I would like for aggressive. So I bought some sole plates, tried them out, got a good, what would I say, like 20 sessions on them. And man, like the flex on these are absolutely perfect. It's like stiff enough where it gives you support, but enough flex where I can do like all of my tricks and topside tricks with ease, no issues. And you know, the sole plate, with it being like nice and wide, it locks into ledges so I don't slip out. And you know, it's like absolutely perfect. Like I have no complaints over the stiffness, and I didn't do the heat molding with boiling water, you know, trying to force the tabs or any snipping. For me, they just felt really, really good out of the gate. And I would say that the stiffness on these falls between, that's hard. I would say it falls similar to the IQON AG15s. I'd say it's a little stiffer than like them 909s, way stiffer than Faction Plastics or Tactical V1s, but less stiff than FR1s and like the Versatility. So yeah, there's that. And you know, one thing too is with the crown liners and the MyFit Prime is because it is a little thicker, you know, you end up with some plushiness there that helps kind of give you some room, like if you want to flex a little more. So it may not engage the plastic, but it's like engaging the liner as part of the flex. And you know, so that's a nice little like relief too. I found that the plastic on these was super, super durable. And, you know, sometimes when you skate plastics, like the longer you skate them, the more flexier and sloppy they get. And so that's one thing I tested is like I rode these for big wheel for 4 months, went back and, you know, skated aggressive for a couple months. And then, you know, I've gone back to skating big wheel to see if there's any difference in flex. And that there wasn't any. I couldn't tell any. I will say too, though, I mentioned the sole plates and how wide they are and how well they grind. This has been one of my favorite skates of all time for how they feel when grinding. Like everything just locks in so well, slides so well, skate feels really good, super enjoyable, like no complaints. And, you know, I do think that this is a very versatile skate, you know, so I had no problems skating at 165, no problem skating it aggressive. And I think it worked well for each. You know, I noticed some people too, they talked about how they had broken hardware on the skates. I did not have that issue. I bought these around the same time, and I know a lot of the complaints were at the aggressive model. And part of me wondered, like, well, is that because they came with like different length frame bolts that may have been too short? I don't know. I didn't ride that. I just know that, you know, what I did is I kind of measured like, okay, how thick is the top of the frame? You know, how thick is the receiver? How long of a frame bolt do I need? And I just kind of, you know, went through my, you know, bag of hardware and just found like, okay, here's the axles I use. And I didn't have any problems with them breaking, because I suspect that was part of it, is like, you know, if you got a frame bolt too short, put a lot of torque on it, it's going to fracture the receiver, you know, at its weakest spot. And yeah, so with these two, you know, I like the flex. I didn't notice any issues with forward flex, lateral flex. I mean, it was just absolutely perfect for me. No complaints. You know, one thing I like about these two is they come at a really affordable price point. And I can't remember what I paid on these. I want to say it was like $400 for the full setup with like the frames and the wheels and the liner. I mean, I skated the liner, you know, I sold off the frames and the hardware and got a good chunk of my money back. But, you know, for that type of setup, like endless frames, you know, they're double the price of what like the IQON D codes are. Different quality, but yeah, you know, kind of getting off on a tangent. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really affordable skate, like if you're buying the shell with the hardware. And then, you know, one thing I really liked about these too is they're really good for skating transition. So, you know, I'm talking like quarter pipes, bigger ramps, and, you know, as like if you've got a super flexy skate and you're skating like bigger quarter pipes, you like notice as you drop in, your feet kind of like want to buckle and flop to the sides, and then it throws you off for whatever you're gonna do. These have like the appropriate amount of stiffness, so that way, you don't have any of that like loss of responsiveness. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about my dislikes with the shells. So, one thing I mentioned is that the liners were the stock liners, they didn't fit the shell, that you could feel them moving around within the shell. And that's really a trade-off of having a larger and wider shell, is that you need a liner to really fill it. That's not going to pack in over time. And, the hard part with that too is like, okay, what liner is going to work with this? Because if you look at the liners on the marketplace, the current trend is like thinner foams, so that way you can downsize the skate as close as possible. But there's not really a lot out there that's geared towards, how do you fill space in a shell? It'd be nice if there was. The closest that I could find is the MyFit crowns, and that, generally filled the shell really well, and I've had no complaints with it, but I can't say everyone's going to share that same experience. I pointed out in one of my videos that there is 45 strap mold or holes in the mold where you can just drill them out and put a 45 strap on. I think in the future, that may be something that should be considered as, if they make tweaks to the liner to fill the shell better, maybe putting in a 45 strap to help keep it from the liner from sliding forward. I think that could go a long ways. My biggest complaint about this skate is how shallow the toe box is. And as you can see, it tapers down. There's some additional plastic here. You've got somewhat thick plastic on the bottom, so it doesn't give you a lot of space for your toe. And because how much it tapers down, if you're at the upper end of the shell and that liner is moving, you're just going to slam into the upper part end of the shell, and it's extremely uncomfortable, but it also doesn't give you a lot of options on how to fix that. So, what I ended up doing is I took out the shock absorber with the insole. I put in the brand new white standard Omni shock absorbers, which, extend pretty far into the skate. And then I just left the foam kind of shock pad over the hardware that comes in there, and that opened up the shell and gave me more space, but I can still feel my toe kind of touching the top of this shell. And this is really the only skate that I can remember where I have felt that. So a little bit of an odd design choice, given that this skate is supposed to be so customized around fit. But yeah, because it is the shallow toe box, if you've got bigger toes or you're skating it with that insole, it can really make it feel like a quarter to half size smaller than it really is. So, one thing I would recommend in the future is they honestly could get rid of that foam insole. The foam padding that they put over the hardware, just put that over the entire boot to add some additional shock absorption. That'll clear up, the extra room in the toe, and then just use the shock absorber and Velcro it to the underside of a MyFit Crown 2 liner. Have that Crown 2 come stock with it, and boom, that'd be perfect setup, out of the box, good for everyone. I think anyone, most people, because I feel like I have an average shaped foot. So, yeah, one of my complaints, MyFit Crown liner, does not complement the shell very well, so had to switch to the Crown 2. One other thing I think is a little odd is the bottom of the skate. It's on the aggressive sole plates, this pattern was on the top side of the sole plate, so it's not exposed. But when you're riding big wheel, this all is. So, naturally it's going to collect dirt as you ride, but you really don't have a way to clean this out. So it just ends up looking really dirty, and you see dirt everywhere. So it's just not the cleanest setup. And I'm really surprised that they didn't flip it and put that on the inside of the skate, because when you put your liner in there, you're not really going to feel, all these perforations. So, one other thing that I just wanted to point out, and I didn't have an issue with it because I'm not changing the setup very frequently. I went from like skating big wheel, setup for aggressive for a couple months, and then just went back to big wheel. So it wasn't a big deal for me, but there is a lot of hardware, and it can make for a cumbersome swapping. And it's complicated because it's not really the best for easily swapping between like aggressive or big wheel or wizard. If you're wanting to do that more frequently, like trying to do this 3 to 4 times in a week would be extremely annoying, in my opinion. So my opinion, this is a set it, forget it. You want to set it up, ride it for a while, and then if you want to change it up and do something different, go ahead. But you should know that it is a bit of a labor-intensive process. So what are my final thoughts on the skate? I think it is a good, versatile skate. I do think that it is going to be a set and forget type skate. I don't think it's one where you're going to want to set it up one way on one day, change it the next day, go back to the way it was before, because it's going to be very cumbersome. I also think that with the way the shell is shaped, that you are going to have to customize it a little bit with the type of liner, shock absorber, to get it to fit the foot of the shape of your foot the way that was comfortable to ride. And in my opinion, I think that it's probably best to go for the Interlink model because it comes with all the different adapters, the sole plates, no liner, and then really gives you that ability to customize that fit out of the box without spending additional money on frames and liners and then having to spend more for replacement parts. And overall, I really, really enjoyed these for both big wheel skating and aggressive skating. Let's go ahead and talk about who I think this skate is best for. Honestly, with it being a wider shell, it is going to be better for someone with a wider, more voluminous foot. And it, gives you custom options depending on whether you want a wizard, big wheel skate, or aggressive. And I think it's good for, at least big wheel and aggressive skating. I don't wizard skate, so I can't really comment on that. But I suspect it's going to be a similar feel to kind of a mix between big wheel skating and aggressive. And then I would say that, because it is a little bit stiffer of a plastic, this is going to be good for anybody who is looking for a stiffer and supportive skate that also offers enough flex for aggressive. Who I would say the skate is not for is someone who's looking for a very flexible skate, like the Faction Plastics. I would also say that if you've got a very tiny, narrow, low volume foot, you're going to have a hard time filling the space within the skate shell. So I don't know that that is going to be a project for you if you're that type of person. And, I think if you're looking for a skate where it's really easy and really quick to go from one setup to the next every time you want to skate, this is probably not the skate for you too, just because of the amount of hardware you have to go through just to get it set up one way or the next. Well, that wraps up today's review. If you've got any questions, comments, feel free to drop me a line. I'll do my best to get back to you. Thanks all for watching, and we'll catch you next time.